The planet Arcanes Prime had always been shrouded in mystery. Its shimmering atmosphere and bioluminescent flora were more than just natural wonders. They were the remnants of a once great alien civilization that had vanished thousands of years ago. For decades, explorers and colonists had ventured to this distant world, driven by curiosity and greed. However, none dared to venture too close to the ruins at its heart. Stories of an ancient alien warrior, clad in impenetrable obsidian armor and surrounded by an aura of foreboding, kept even the bravest explorers at bay. Dr. Evelyn Hart, a xenologist and archaeologist, stood on the edge of the jungle overlooking the ruins. Her research had brought her to many alien worlds, but Arcanes Prime was different. The air here seemed alive with whispers, the ground humming faintly, as if the planet itself were aware of her presence. The ruins below glowed faintly under the planet's perpetual twilight, and at their center, a massive figure stood motionless. It was the warrior, an enigma that had fascinated her for years. Evelyn adjusted her gear, her heart racing. The stories she'd heard were enough to make anyone hesitate. Survivors of past encounters spoke of glowing eyes that pierced the soul, of an overwhelming presence that could paralyze even the most seasoned adventurers. Yet, Evelyn wasn't here to challenge the warrior. She was here to understand it. Her assistant, a young engineer named Marcus, hesitated as he handed her the scanner. "Dr. Hart, are you sure about this?" "The logs from past missions are full of fear and speculation," Evelyn interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "This warrior has been here for thousands of years, Marcus. It hasn't attacked unless provoked. I believe it's protecting something, and I intend to find out what." Marcus sighed, adjusting his own pack. "I just hope we're not the ones to provoke it." The jungle path leading to the ruins was dense and alive with sounds. Strange creatures with iridescent wings flitted through the air, their calls echoing in an otherworldly harmony. The ground was soft underfoot, covered in a carpet of glowing moss that seemed to pulse gently with each step. Evelyn couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the place, even as her nerves grew taut with anticipation. As they approached the edge of the ruins, the air grew colder, and the sounds of the jungle faded. The architecture was unlike anything Evelyn had seen before, towering monoliths adorned with intricate carvings, depicting beings that appeared both humanoid and otherworldly. The symbols glowed faintly, their patterns shifting as if alive. Then she saw it. The alien warrior stood at the center of the ruins, its towering frame a blend of organic and mechanical perfection. Its armor was black as night, etched with glowing blue sigils that pulsed rhythmically, as if in sync with the planet's heartbeat. Its face was obscured by a helmet, but its eyes, bright, piercing orbs of light, locked onto Evelyn the moment she stepped into the clearing. Her breath caught. The presence of the warrior was overwhelming, a palpable force that made her feel small and insignificant. Yet, she forced herself to stand tall, her gaze steady. Marcus froze behind her, his hand instinctively reaching for the small energy pistol at his side. "Don't," Evelyn whispered. "It's not attacking." The warrior raised an arm, its movements slow and deliberate. The sigils on its armor flared brighter, casting an eerie glow across the ruins. The ground beneath them trembled, and Marcus took a step back, his face pale. "Dr. Hart, I really think we should—" "No," Evelyn said firmly, cutting him off. "It's not a threat." She took a cautious step forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "My name is Dr. Evelyn Hart," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I've come to learn about you, about your people. I mean no harm." The warrior remained still, its glowing eyes fixed on her. The air grew thick with tension, the only sound the faint hum of the warrior's aura. For a moment, Evelyn thought it might strike, that her gamble had been foolish. But then, the sigils on its armor dimmed slightly, and the trembling in the ground ceased. Evelyn exhaled, relief washing over her. "It understands," she murmured, half to herself. Marcus, still rooted to his spot, stared at her in disbelief. "How can you be sure?" "I can't," Evelyn admitted, her eyes never leaving the warrior. but it hasn't attacked us, and that's a start. She carefully reached into her pack, pulling out a small artifact, a piece of alien technology she had recovered from another part of the planet. It was a crystalline shard, etched with patterns similar to the ones on the warrior's armor. Holding it out in both hands, she approached slowly. The warrior tilted its head, the movement almost human in its curiosity. As Evelyn stepped closer, the sigils on its armor began to pulse in time with the patterns on the shard. A faint hum filled the air, and the shard began to glow. Evelyn's heart raced. "It recognizes this," she whispered. "It's a part of its history." The warrior extended a hand, its massive fingers surprisingly delicate as they hovered over the shard. Evelyn placed it gently in its palm, watching as the glow of the shard merged with the sigils on the warrior's armor. For the first time, the alien's posture relaxed, its aura shifting from one of intimidation to something softer, almost grateful. Marcus finally found his voice. "What just happened?" "I think," Evelyn began, her voice filled with wonder. "It remembers." The warrior stepped back, its glowing eyes still locked on Evelyn. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, it pointed to a monolith at the edge of the clearing. Evelyn followed its gesture, her gaze landing on an intricate carving that seemed to depict the warrior standing among others of its kind, their arms raised in unity. "It's showing us its past," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. As the warrior lowered its arm, Evelyn felt a sense of connection, as if she had been entrusted with something precious. This wasn't just a guardian, it was a sentinel of a lost civilization, a living memory of a people who had vanished. And for the first time in centuries, it had found someone willing to listen. The encounter ended without violence, but Evelyn knew this was only the beginning. The warrior had opened a door, one that led to a history waiting to be uncovered. As she and Marcus retreated from the ruins, she couldn't shake the feeling that this ancient being had been waiting for her, for someone willing to bridge the gap between fear and understanding. The jungle came alive again as they made their way back, the whispers of the planet now seeming less ominous and more welcoming. Evelyn knew she had taken the first step on a path that would change everything, not just for her, but for humanity and whatever remained of the warrior's people. The team returned to their makeshift camp on the outskirts of the jungle, their minds still reeling from the encounter with the ancient alien warrior. Dr. Evelyn Hart sat at the portable workstation, reviewing the scans her device had captured. The data was unlike anything she had ever seen, an intricate web of energy signatures, pulsating in rhythms that seemed almost alive. Marcus paced nearby, his usual calm demeanor replaced with nervous energy. "I don't know how you stayed so composed back there, document. That thing could have crushed us without a second thought." Evelyn glanced up from her screen, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe it could have. But it didn't. That means something, Marcus. It's not mindlessly aggressive, it's intelligent. It remembers its past, its purpose. And what do you think that purpose is?" Marcus asked, his tone skeptical. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "Protection. The ruins, the artifacts. Everything here suggests this warrior was left behind as a sentinel. Its role isn't to attack, but to guard." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Guard what, though?" "I mean, the place is empty." "Not empty," Evelyn corrected. She gestured to the monitor, where a 3D rendering of the ruins displayed glowing points of energy. "There's something beneath the ruins. Look at these energy signatures. They're concentrated in a central chamber. Whatever the warrior is protecting, it's down there." Marcus stared at the screen, a frown forming. "And you want to go digging around in its sacred ground? That sounds like a great way to get vaporized." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Not digging. Communicating. The shard I gave it was a key, something it recognized. If we can understand its language, its symbols, we might be able to find out what it's guarding without disrupting anything." The next day, they returned to the ruins, this time with a smaller team. Alongside Evelyn and Marcus were two specialists, Dr. Lila Morin, a linguist with expertise in deciphering alien scripts, and Jacob Lynn, an engineer skilled in handling ancient technology. Each carried a mixture of excitement and trepidation as they approached the clearing. The warrior stood in the same spot as before, its massive frame radiating an aura of silent vigilance. As the team entered the clearing, its glowing eyes turned toward them, its presence immediately commanding respect. Evelyn stepped forward, holding up both hands in a gesture of peace. "We've returned," she said calmly. "We want to understand." The warrior tilted its head slightly, its glowing eyes narrowing. The sigils on its armor began to pulse, and the carvings on the nearby monoliths lit up in response. The air grew thick with energy, and the hum that had been faint the day before now resonated louder, vibrating through the ground. Lila stepped up beside Evelyn, her tablet ready. "These symbols, they're forming a sequence. It's like a language." The warrior extended its arm toward one of the monoliths. A beam of light shot from its palm, illuminating the carvings and projecting a series of holographic symbols into the air. The glyphs swirled and shifted, their patterns mesmerizing. Evelyn nodded to Lila. "This is your moment." Lila approached cautiously, her eyes scanning the glyphs. "It's a pictographic language," she murmured, her fingers flying over her tablet. "Each symbol seems to represent a concept or an action. If I can cross-reference it with known linguistic structures." The warrior stepped closer, its imposing presence making Lila freeze for a moment. Evelyn placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Keep going," she urged softly. "It's watching. I think it wants us to understand." Lila took a deep breath and continued her work. As she deciphered each symbol, she spoke aloud. "Guard, protect, remember, balance." Evelyn's heart raced. Balance. Of course. The warrior isn't just protecting something physical, it's maintaining balance. Between what, though? Jacob, who had been studying the energy readings on his own device, interjected. "Doc, you might want to see this. The energy levels are spiking." Evelyn turned to him, her brow furrowed. "Spiking how?" "Whatever's under these ruins, it's waking up," Jacob replied. "The more the warrior interacts with us, the stronger the readings get. It's like it's responding to us." The ground beneath their feet trembled, and the hum grew louder. The warrior stepped back, raising its arms. The glyphs in the air shifted, forming a new sequence. This time, they were clearer, symbols of light and dark, of harmony and chaos. "It's showing us the stakes," Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't just about protecting some treasure. It's about maintaining the balance of this entire world." Lila frowned at her tablet. "But what's threatening that balance? What's the source of the instabilities?" The warrior lowered its arms, and the glyphs disappeared. It turned its glowing eyes to Evelyn, then pointed toward a distant part of the jungle. The direction was unmistakable. "There," Evelyn said, her resolve firm. "It wants us to go there." The journey to the location indicated by the warrior was fraught with challenges. The jungle seemed to grow denser the closer they got, its foliage thicker and its paths more treacherous. The air buzzed with an unnatural energy, and even the local wildlife seemed on edge, their calls sharp and urgent. When they finally emerged into a clearing, the sight before them took their breath away. A massive crater dominated the landscape, its edges lined with jagged rocks and scorched earth. At its center was a structure, an alien machine, pulsing with a red, ominous glow. It was a stark contrast to the harmonious beauty of the ruins they had left behind. Jacob's device beeped furiously. "This thing is putting out insane levels of energy. Whatever it is, it's not natural." Evelyn approached cautiously, her eyes scanning the structure. "It's a weapon," she said, the realization hitting her like a ton of bricks. An ancient weapon left behind by the same civilization.
But why?
To destroy what? The warrior appeared behind them, its sudden presence startling the team. It raised its arm toward the machine, and the glyphs reappeared in the air. This time, the symbols told a story, a tale of conflict, of a battle waged to save their world from an external threat. The weapon was a last resort, designed to obliterate the invaders. But something had gone wrong. The weapon had turned on its creators, threatening to consume the planet itself. "That's why it's here," Evelyn said, her voice heavy with understanding. "The warrior was left to guard against this, to ensure it never reactivates." Lila's voice was tinged with fear. But it is reactivating. The energy spikes. It's waking up. Evelyn turned to Jacob. Can we shut it down? Jacob studied the machine, his expression grim. Maybe. But if I make one wrong move, I could set it off instead. The warrior stepped forward, placing a massive hand on the machine. The glyphs on its armor flared brightly, and the red glow of the machine began to waver. It's helping, Evelyn realized. It's stabilizing the weapon. But it can't do it alone. Evelyn turned to her team. This is it. This is what we came here for. We need to work with it, to trust it. If we can't, this planet is doomed. And maybe us with it. The air around the alien weapon crackled with energy as the red glow pulsing from its core grew, increasingly erratic. The warrior stood motionless beside it, its luminous glyphs shifting and flickering in response to the destabilizing machine. Evelyn and her team could feel the intensity of the moment. This was their last chance to save not only the jungle, but potentially the entire planet. Jacob crouched near the weapon's outer panel, his hands moving cautiously over its intricate surface. The alien metal was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It pulsed faintly beneath his touch, as though alive. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he connected his diagnostic device to the weapon, the screen lighting up with unreadable alien code. This thing is like trying to disarm a bomb while reading a language I've never seen before, Jacob muttered, his voice strained. Lila knelt beside him, her tablet already cross-referencing the glyphs projected by the warrior with the sequences appearing on Jacob's device. Focus on the patterns. The warrior's glyphs. It's giving us a guide. Evelyn stood slightly apart, her gaze fixed on the warrior. Its eyes glowed with an intensity she hadn't seen before, and the aura surrounding its form shimmered erratically. It was clear the being was exerting immense energy to stabilize the weapon temporarily. She stepped closer, speaking softly. You're helping us, but you're struggling. What else can we do? The warrior turned its head toward her, its expression unreadable, but its intent clear. Slowly, it extended an arm and pointed to Evelyn's chest, where the pendant hung, the shard of crystal she had offered it during their first encounter. Evelyn's hand instinctively moved to the pendant. This? You need this? The warrior nodded, the motion subtle but undeniable. Marcus, standing guard near the edge of the clearing, spoke up. Doc, are you sure about this? That thing could be a key or a trigger. Evelyn hesitated for only a moment before unfastening the pendant and stepping forward. She extended it toward the warrior, who took it with surprising gentleness. The crystal shard began to glow brightly in its grasp, the light growing stronger as the glyphs on its armor synchronized with the patterns on the weapon. A low hum reverberated through the ground, and Jacob's device emitted a shrill beep. Whatever you just did, it's working. The energy spikes are stabilizing. The warrior placed the glowing shard into a small indentation on the weapon, one that had previously been invisible. The shard fit perfectly, its light spreading across the machine's surface like veins of molten gold. The red glow dimmed, replaced by a more subdued orange. For a moment, the team allowed themselves to hope. But then, the weapon emitted a deep, resonating tone, and the orange light began to flicker. Jacob's eyes widened as new readings flooded his screen. Oh no! It's rebooting. That stabilization was just a temporary effect. If it finishes this cycle, it's going to activate fully. Evelyn turned to the warrior, her voice urgent. What now? How do we stop it for good? The warrior raised its hand, and a new sequence of glyphs appeared in the air. Lila scrambled to interpret them, her fingers flying over her tablet. It's saying the weapon can't be shut down. It's too damaged. The only way to stop it is to destroy its core. Destroy the core? Marcus exclaimed. Won't that blow us all to hell? Lila shook her head.
No.
The glyphs indicate that the core can be destroyed safely, but it requires an external energy source to overload it. Something strong enough to destabilize the system completely. Evelyn looked at the warrior, understanding dawning on her. You're the energy source, aren't you? The warrior's glowing eyes met hers, and it nodded. Its posture straightened, and it stepped closer to the weapon, its glyphs flaring brightly. No, Evelyn said firmly, stepping into its path. There has to be another way. If you do this, you'll... The warrior raised a hand, a silent but firm gesture of resolve. Its eyes softened slightly, conveying a message Evelyn didn't need words to understand. This was its purpose, its duty. Protecting the balance meant making the ultimate sacrifice. Evelyn's throat tightened, but she stepped aside, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. The warrior moved to the weapon, placing both hands on its surface. The glyphs on its armor synchronized with those on the machine, creating a cascade of light that enveloped the entire clearing. The energy around them grew almost blinding, forcing the team to shield their eyes. Jacob shouted over the rising hum. "We need to move. If this thing goes critical, we can't be anywhere near it." Evelyn hesitated, torn between staying and ensuring the warrior's sacrifice wasn't in vain, or leaving to save her team. Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Doc, we have to go."
Now?
Reluctantly, Evelyn nodded, and the team retreated to the edge of the clearing. As they ran, the light behind them intensified, casting long shadows through the dense jungle. They dove behind a cluster of rocks just as a deafening pulse of energy erupted from the weapon. The ground shook violently, and a shockwave rippled through the jungle, flattening trees and sending flocks of alien birds screeching into the sky. The light dimmed slowly, and when the team finally dared to look, the clearing was silent. The weapon was gone, reduced to a smoldering crater. The warrior was nowhere to be seen, its massive form replaced by a faintly glowing crystal shard embedded in the ground where it had stood. Evelyn approached the shard cautiously, her heart heavy. She knelt and touched the crystal, feeling a warmth that was both comforting and sorrowful. The warrior's essence lingered within, a testament to its sacrifice. Lila and Jacob joined her, their expressions somber. "It saved us," Lila said quietly. "And this world." Evelyn nodded, her fingers brushing the shard. "It gave everything to protect the balance. We owe it more than we can ever repay." Marcus approached, placing a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "What now?" Evelyn stood, holding the shard gently. "We document everything. We make sure the world knows what happened here. And we honor its sacrifice by ensuring the balance it fought for is preserved." The team stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their journey settling over them. Then, with the shard in hand, they turned and began the long trek back to their camp, their mission forever changed by the ancient warrior's final stand.